Like your TV show, what is it called?
Dog Times. So the EL zone is perfectly calibrated with the Komodo in this situation. I'm exporting the log image via SDI directly into the smallHD. And as you'll notice, I can turn off this LUT. That's the key important factor here. You don't want to be exporting a LUT out of the SDI because it's imperative that the monitor is receiving the log image in order for the EL zone to be interpreted correctly, okay, which is your color pipe in here under the feed. There you'll see it is log 3G10 for color pipe 1, which is the SDI. And there we know SDI log 3G10. Let me show you what happens if I was to export the LUT out of SDI or HDMI if you're on an HDMI only camera. If we're sending out a LUT, now it's showing that we are 2 stops, 3 stops. Some parts of the face are now 4 stops over. Watch the difference. This is with the LUT on, and now I'm gonna turn it off. Boom, big, big difference. LUT on, LUT off. This is why the EL zone needs the log image to work properly. What's nice is we have this really cool graph right up top, right? This is telling us everything we need to know. As you'll notice, these light yellow colors are for light skin tone exposure, which are actually half a stop and 1 full stop over middle gray. On the other end, these light greens is a half a stop and a full stop under for darker skin tone exposure. These colors are almost contradictory to what we're used to looking at in normal false color world. However, as I've just demonstrated with what happens when you send the log image and you dial in the correct color pipeline, now we essentially have a calibrated spot meter designed for this specific camera. Okay, so there's gonna be a little bit difference, you know, actual true skin tone and not, you know, plastic, not rubber. I like the edge. The edge is quite okay. But the problem is with me, now I'm getting an eye light because I'm facing towards the key light, but I might need to get a little bit of soft bounce card in here just because this might be getting a tad too crunchy. Yeah, so now the bounce card is in here, but you can notice that the reason why I say it looks lit is because I just want to bring up the background a little bit. It's a little bit too nuanced. So I'm gonna give a little bit more level out of the small rig, and maybe that won't make the kicker seem so random. Now, I went with a really stark contrast, not only in our light levels, but also in our color. That's why the background is about 1,000 degrees colder than the foreground. With all this diffusion and everything, this lamp is giving me about 3,800 Kelvin on the Sekonic color meter, whereas the background, I jumped 1,000 degrees colder and went for 4,800 on everything else. That was by choice. You can love it or hate it. It's all subjective in my opinion. You'll notice that it probably wasn't a good idea to do this because if you have someone that's moving around, that's gonna look ridiculous. So you would probably just wanna opt for not doing that weird halo idea and just going with an actual practical in the shot. And maybe if I had access to a little tiny lamp, if we had a production designer, I would put it right here, right back there where my finger is on the shelf, kind of cover up that big shaft of white wall there anyways, and have a nice little practical in there with a really cool kind of old-timey shade on it. Put the Astera bulb in there and then, but you know, dim it down like 5%. I think that this edge is a little bit too harsh and it's not quite subtle on my face the way it was hitting the mannequin, so we're gonna dial that back just a tad. There we go. I brought the Astera Titan tube, which is this edge. I brought that down 20%, and now it's just nice and subtle. A little bit of separation there, but obviously the Astera bulb directly behind my dome is doing a lot of that separation as well. Let's talk about this a little bit because the EL zone system is literally a calibrated spot meter. Why that is so important is because light meters like this should be calibrated to match each camera they're going to be used with. And also they should probably just be kind of serviced and recalibrated over time anyways. We can just see how accurate this specific one is with what the actual Komodo is doing. One nice thing about these meters is I can go in here and tell it that I am actually using 3 stops of ND. So this is where the scene started at. It is very, very dark. So now I'm gonna pull the ND. So this is what we started with just entering the room. You'll notice with the high extreme highs of our background light coming in off of that window in the background, I mean, that's essentially our room tone. You're noticing here we're talking about 3 to 4 stops overexposed in these really highlighted areas. The rest of this is competing with skin tones. Stop, full stop, half a stop overexposed. In order to get rid of that, I can grab the iris and I can start stopping down on this, and you can watch the EL zone change to where we actually would want it, something like that. Well, now if I look at the iris, I go, oh, it's on a T4 now. Let me put it back on a T2. I want to be ripped wide open for that shallow depth of field. This is why I put in the stops of ND to make up for that background. With the camera settings exactly like they are on the Komodo there. By the way, that's ISO 500, 24 frames per second, 180 degree shutter angle. And I have told the meter that we have 3 stops of ND, AKA a 0.9. That little 9 down there is showing us that it's pretty damn close to a 1.4. The problem with that is I have the Schneider Xenon 75mm ripped wide open at a T2. However, the EL zone is showing me a half a stop and even 1 stop over. So technically, the Komodo is reading around 2 split, maybe even a 2.8 up here on the forehead where it's kind of closer to the lamp. Meanwhile, this is telling me that we're not even barely hitting a 1.4. That is a little bit of inconsistency, right? So this is why I say it's almost way more advantageous now to take advantage of the EL zone system. It's not a big deal if you don't have access to a light meter. Most people stopped using light meters anyways, which is kind of sad. But the reality is with the EL zone, you don't necessarily need the light meter anymore, because now you have a custom calibrated meter in your monitor with that EL zone. Now, if you missed my initial demo and setup of how to use the EL zone on a real world workflow, which this is not, I already did a video on that, and I will leave a link to it down in the description below. So I hope you watch that one after you watch this one if you haven't already seen that. I just wanted to show, because I get so many questions and requests to talk about how to use a light meter, I just feel that with the EL zone, myself, I have slowly gotten away from using light meters. Now, if you want to see a demo that I will be doing in the future, be sure to tap that subscribe button, because I will show where when I'm the DP, how I only use my color meter and my color meter only, because I just don't like having a lot of stuff on me when I'm the cinematographer. So this meter barely ever comes out of the AKS. I will be showing how I use my color meter as a light meter. Granted, you will never be able to use this as a spot meter, but it is an incident meter. So then you have the perfect combo, in my opinion, because the EL zone is the calibrated spot meter, and the color meter is not only a wonderful color meter, but it also is an incident meter if you know how to use it as one. So be sure you tap that subscribe button. You have some comments or thoughts on the EL zone, please leave those down below, because I do respond to literally every comment. Big shout out to the biggest supporters of the channel, and that is the DOGTIMES Patreon. That is my own virtual indie clubhouse for filmmakers, where I break down every job I do here in Los Angeles. It is completely unadulterated, unedited, straight up just me and the way I am with everyone in the real world, like an experience that you would get if you were riding in the sidecar of every job I do. You get to hear my thoughts on the pre-production, everything that happens on the day, because I usually have a BTS shooter with us, and then always sharing my thoughts on the back end, on the post-production side. It's the real reality, the nitty-gritty of what it takes and what it's like being a true ultra low budget independent filmmaker right here in the Super Bowl of the filmmaking community known as Los Angeles. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My big challenge there with the white wall room is like, okay, we're going to keep it down. We're going to keep it down in terms of illuminance, in terms of light level. The problem is some of those shots was a little too crunchy. Or is that too jarring to go from shitty cell phone to fucking red?
Not at all. No, it'll be good.